Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, the manhunt is still on for the suspect accused of shooting Minnesota state lawmakers and their spouses. He managed to evade law enforcement during a violent encounter. Israel and Iran enter their third day of missile strikes. Today, an Iranian missile hit a residential area in Israel, reportedly killing at least 4 people and injuring more than 100. Meanwhile, President Trump said it's possible that the U.S. could get involved. Our panel discusses Israel's third day of airstrikes against Iran and its impact on U.S.-Iran nuclear talks. A top vision specialist says you could be straining your eyes without even realizing it. Details on how to discover your true lens prescription and how it can help. And Girl Scouts in Massachusetts surprised service members with nearly 14,000 boxes of cookies, a generous show of appreciation for the troops' service.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Arlene Richards. The manhunt continues for the gunman accused of killing a Minnesota lawmaker and her husband and injuring another state lawmaker and his wife. Authorities are searching for 57-year-old Vance Bolter. When law enforcement encountered a man believed to be the suspect, he opened fire and evaded police. He's suspected of impersonating police during the shooting spree. The FBI is offering an award of up to $50,000 for information leading to his arrest and conviction. On Saturday morning, Minnesota State Representative Melissa Hortman and her husband were shot and killed at their home in Brooklyn Park, Minnesota. A few miles away in an earlier shooting, State Senator John Hoffman and his wife were wounded in their home. President Trump said in a Truth Social post that such horrific violence will not be tolerated in the U.S. and that the U.S. Attorney General and FBI are investigating. The tragic attacks happened alongside others across the country yesterday. One person died after being shot during a No Kings protest in Salt Lake City, Utah, while authorities in Austin, Texas evacuated the site of another protest after credible threats were made against lawmakers. In the Middle East, an Iranian missile struck a residential area in Israel, reportedly killing at least 4 people and injuring more than 100. Meanwhile, President Trump said it's possible that the U.S. military could get involved in the Israel-Iran war. NTD's Jason Perry has the update.
In what would normally look like a scene out of the Gaza Strip, residents in Israel were seen inspecting the damage of an Iranian airstrike. On Sunday morning, the mayor of Buyout, the city that was hit, said at least 4 people were killed and more than 100 were wounded. Several others were unaccounted for. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited the site as well.
Think about what would happen if Iran had nuclear weapons to land on Israeli cities. Think about what would happen if Iran had 20,000 such missiles. Not one, 20,000 of them in an existential threat to Israel.
And he said that Iran would, quote, pay a very heavy price for murdering innocent civilians. Israeli forces say they have now gained aerial superiority from West Iran to Tehran, which means Israel's fighter jets have full control of the airspace in these areas, something very critical to winning a war. Israel's chief of the general staff explained.
Over the past 24 hours, we completed an aerial route to Tehran and conducted an aerial breaching battle. Israeli Air Force pilots are flying at great risk to their lives, hundreds of kilometers away from Israel, striking hundreds of different targets with precision.
And so far, Israel said they have struck over 250 targets in Iran, including the headquarters of Iran's nuclear project. Israel also released footage of their fighter pilots shooting down Iranian drones. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister said on Sunday that Iran did not want this war.
We were focused on implementing diplomacy regarding our nuclear program. However, this violation was forced upon us. This defense is in response to the violation. Therefore, if the violation stops, our reaction will naturally stop too.
In an interview on ABC News, President Trump said that it's possible for the United States military to get involved in this war, but he said the U.S. is not involved at this time. Jason Perry, NTD News.
In another interview today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that Iran could see a regime change as a result of the strikes. Israeli officials have said that's not their goal. Instead, Israel's focus is on dismantling Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. We'll have more analysis on the impacts of the strikes later in tonight's show. Now back in the U.S., it was a turbulent week in Washington and across the country with escalating protests, military deployments, new federal programs, and a major trade deal. NTD's Daniel Monahan has your White House week in review.
Protests against ICE actions in Los Angeles to deport illegal immigrants turned violent this week. Some demonstrators set cars ablaze and threw rocks and chunks of concrete at police.
Going up on bridges and dropping it into the roof of a car. They were throwing it at our police. They were throwing it at our soldiers.
President Trump sent in the National Guard and Marines to restore order, a move Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth defended.
In Los Angeles, we believe that ICE, which is a federal law enforcement agency, has the right to safely conduct operations.
Governor Gavin Newsom criticized the move.
Today, we sought an emergency court order to stop the use of the American military to engage in law enforcement activities across Los Angeles.
Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass said the rioting was provoked by the White House.
I posit that maybe we are part of a national experiment to determine how far the federal government can go.
Hands up, hands up.
Democratic Senator Alex Padilla interrupted Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem's press conference, demanding answers on ICE actions.
Hands up, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary.
The 52-year-old was handcuffed and briefly detained. The Secret Service thought he was an attacker, and officers responded. President Trump was at Fort Bragg this week to celebrate the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary. Trump witnessed a parachute jump while there. The president also broke out some dance moves to the delight of the soldiers. The White House announced the $1,000 child Trump accounts,
which will make it possible for countless American children to have a strong start in life.
Under the program, the federal government would put $1,000 into individual accounts for babies born between 2025 and the end of 2028. The family and others could make annual contributions and no withdrawals until the child turns 18. The account is intended for expenses tied to higher education, buying a home, or starting a small business. The president checked on the progress of the American flagpole he is having installed on the South Lawn, stopping to take a photo with workers. The Trump administration reached a trade deal framework agreement in London with China this week.
Obviously, the team stayed at it until it was done, late into the evening.
The EPA proposed repealing all greenhouse gas emission standards for the power sector under the Clean Air Act. Environmental groups called the rollbacks dangerous and vowed to challenge the rules in court. And President Trump also signed a bill to block California's electric vehicle mandate.
Lower prices, better cars, and choice.
Sense.
You can say choice.
On behalf of the 8.5 million Americans who work throughout the trucking industry, I thank you.
Trump reacted to the No Kings protest planned for the weekend against his administration.
I don't feel like a king. I have to go through hell to get stuff approved.
Israel struck Iranian nuclear facilities. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. was not involved in the attacks and that its main priority is protecting U.S. troops in the region. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
A busy week on Capitol Hill with Democratic governors being questioned over immigration policies, the Senate debating the president's reconciliation bill, and the House voting on its first rescissions package. Our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
There are things in the House bill that aren't the president's agenda. For instance, the SALT tax deduction increase. So I would say that, and a quicker winding down of the Green New Deal. If Mike Lee and Ron Johnson and Rick Scott and Rand Paul, if they have some degree of success in the Senate, I would consider voting for that bill when it comes back to the House.
The president's big, beautiful bill is being debated in the Senate, and fiscal conservatives there agree with Congressman Thomas Massie that the $40,000 state and local taxes deduction cap and the Inflation Reduction Act provisions are an impasse. But House Republicans did score an important victory this week by passing the White House's first rescission package that will claw back $9.3 billion in funding from NPR, PBS, and USAID.
At the end of the day, rescissions package is all just lipstick on a pig. The Republicans are pushing through an enormous tax break for billionaires that costs trillions of dollars.
I think we have to go to the impact. And the rescissions package, I think particularly around the USAID funding, the foreign affairs funding, and then public broadcasting, we are positioning that as an attack on free speech.
The White House is like all over the place, you know. I wish they get their act together. That's my answer.
House Democrats who oppose the rescissions package are now demanding that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem appear before Congress. And this was after Senator Alex Padilla barged into a press conference where Secretary Noem was speaking and was removed and briefly handcuffed.
Kristi Noem, come before Congress and testify about what occurred today. When is it going to be enough? When somebody gets shot in the streets of Los Angeles? When a member gets shot?
Republicans dismissed the incident as political theater staged by Democrats.
When we were going down to the border, we called up Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We called up CBP. They knew we were coming. They scheduled it. It was all very orderly because we were actually trying to get information, not just trying to get a photo op.
Yeah, listen, no matter what the issue here is, if it's American citizens versus illegal aliens, Democrats pick illegal aliens every single time. This is just another example of that.
Yeah, there's a way to handle business. Barging into a press conference like that, interrupting, isn't the way to do it.
This week, Congress also held a heated hearing that lasted 6 hours with the governors of sanctuary states of Illinois, Minnesota, and New York.
I want to be sure we are defining sanctuary state properly.
I'll define it for you. It is the policy of the state that state officers or employees shall not disclose information to federal immigration authorities for the purpose of federal civil immigration enforcement.
These governors handcuff law enforcement from doing their jobs, harbor predators, and call it compassion. Congress must consider whether to defund every single penny of federal dollars going to cities and states that prioritize criminal, illegal aliens over the American people.
It's important to note that in 2025, the city of New York alone is expected to disburse $4.7 billion to assist illegal migrants. That amount alone represents half of the budget that Immigration and Customs Enforcement has for the fiscal year 2025 nationwide. Reporting for Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
The Chinese regime has been persecuting people of faith for decades, subjecting them to jail, torture, and even forcibly harvesting their organs. A group of medical experts is calling on the U.S. and other nations to help stop the atrocities. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pasdar has the story.
Ending the persecution and forced organ harvesting and holding the perpetrators accountable.
Medical experts from around the globe are making a plea for China to stop live organ harvesting. An organization called Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting held a roundtable this weekend, shining light on the ongoing crimes against humanity.
It's time for the G7 to take the lead to end this atrocity in China.
The US Congress previously found that China's black market is filled with stolen organs. A member with the organization says that China's black market for organs also affects legal organ donations.
If we have a perpetrator like state-sanctioned forced organ harvesting, it undermines everything based on an ethical medical practice.
Independent research has found that China sells the organs for up to $150,000. US lawmakers have been calling on the Chinese regime to stop the atrocity. Arian Pasdar, NTD News.
The Group of Seven summit is kicking off today in Canada. All eyes are on President Trump and what he might say over the next 2 days. We've got Fiona G. reporting from Calgary.
Leaders of some of the world's biggest powers are arriving on Sunday for the Group of Seven summit in Alberta, Canada. Now, the agenda this year covers a wide array of topics, including AI, Ukraine, as well as wildfires. But what's really at the forefront of everyone's minds are tariffs and the Middle East. In a meeting Sunday ahead of the summit with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer touched on the conflict.
The conflict with Israel and Iran is centrepiece. This provides the opportunity to talk to our co-leaders about the fast-moving situation.
Any remarks President Trump makes over the next 2 days surrounding the Israel-Iran conflict will be heavily scrutinized for any possible clues about potential next steps from the U.S. Meanwhile, avoiding tariffs is the top priority for many leaders coming to the table this time around, so we could be seeing more bilateral meetings with Trump rather than a united discussion between all groups. Now, these smaller conversations could result in important decisions or announcements. It's also important to note here that there will be no joint communique this year, as is usually the case for G7 summits. In a call with reporters on Friday, a senior administration official said President Trump is eager to pursue equal and fair trade opportunities for the U.S. The president is also likely to use the next 2 days as an opportunity to demonstrate America's strength on the world stage. This year's G7 summit runs through Tuesday, June 17th. Reporting from Calgary, Fiona G., NTD News.
Coming up, a discussion on the Israel-Iran war and whether the U.S. might get involved. And discover how finding your true lens prescription can reduce eye strain and why many eye doctors avoid laser eye surgery themselves, according to a top New York specialist. That and more in just a minute here on NTD News. Israel unleashed airstrikes across Iran for a third day today and threatened even greater force as hundreds are reported dead in those most recent Middle East escalation. Meanwhile, some Iranian missiles have struck buildings in the heart of Israel. Planned talks on Iran's nuclear program, which could provide an off-ramp, were canceled. How is the U.S. responding, and what are the reactions of the Iranian people? Joining us to discuss are Gerard Filitti, foreign affairs analyst and attorney specializing in national security law and policy, and Masih Ariani, a correspondent with the Epoch Times. Thank you both for joining us tonight.
Pleasure.
All right, Gerard, I want to begin with you. Can you tell us why Israel started these strikes on Iran, and do you think it will be necessary for the U.S. to get involved?
Well, Israel started these strikes for two reasons. One is the one that we are all aware of, that Iran has been consistently enriching uranium to a point that it is a destabilizing force, that Israel was concerned that Iran is very close to producing nuclear weapons-grade materials, and that would result in a greater attack on Israel from Iran with a catastrophic loss of life. So this is a defensive war. The other part, of course, is that Iran is responsible for all of the terrorist attacks being targeted against Israel. They are the ones who control Hezbollah, the Houthis, Hamas, and various other terrorist organizations that have been waging war against Israel, not just since October 7, but for years. So going after Iran's nuclear capabilities and military top hierarchy in such a fantastic way shows that Israel is committed to protecting itself and wants Iran to understand that it has to stop attacking Israel.
So, Masih, I want to turn to you now about what's happening on the ground. Now, you're a reporter originally from Iran, and you've been following the Iranian media's reports as well as speaking to contacts you have there. So, what is the general response of the Iranian people to these strikes by Israel?
Well, first, I'd like to emphasize that the majority of Iranian people are against the regime, and they don't want this regime. But when it comes to this war and what's happening now, I think the majority of people, based on what I'm seeing on social media or talking to people in Iran, they don't want this war. They didn't wish for it because as any other war, innocent people will die, and their life is now in jeopardy and is very difficult for them. So from what I'm seeing, yeah, it's really something that they don't want, and they prefer it to stop as soon as possible.
Now, before we go on, as we said earlier, there were further negotiations between the U.S. and Iran were canceled today. So let's hear a comment from former Vice President Mike Pence on those talks.
I have held the view that others have, that that there can be no nuclear enrichment program whatsoever. It needs to be dismantled or destroyed. Now, if the Iranians want to stand down, I think the president's made it clear he's willing to enter into negotiations, but there can be no nuclear program of any kind, no enrichment program of any kind.
Now, Gerard, I want to come back to you. Former Vice President Mike Pence says there can be no nuclear program, but a senior Trump administration official says the U.S. is committed to the nuclear negotiation. So how likely is it that Iran will come back to the negotiating table, knowing that the U.S. doesn't want them to have a nuclear program, and given these latest developments from Israel?
Well, at present, I think that we can say the nuclear talks are dead. I don't think that Iran has any reason to come back to the negotiating table. There is outrage on the part of the regime in Iran against these airstrikes and what they perceive to be American complicity with Israeli strikes. So there is no incentive for Iran to come back to the table. They are now in a position of rebuilding or trying to rebuild the capability that was lost, although that will be very difficult to do. Remember, we're not just talking about infrastructure. We're talking about scientists who were killed, and that makes it much more difficult to go forward with their enrichment program. Whether there can be a nuclear deal, I'm of the school and the experience that there cannot be. You cannot trust a regime like Iran to keep its word, and the only thing that they're committed to is regional and global instability. So I agree with former Vice President Pence that the negotiations really were a non-starter, and the only reason they went forward was to show goodwill if Iran were willing to back away from what they were doing, which clearly they were not.
Now, Massa, you talked earlier about how many of the people in Iran are against the Iranian leadership, and it's been that way for quite some time. But among some of the people there, they feel that, they don't agree with what's happening now from Israel. So can you tell us about the political and social restrictions that have fueled protests in the recent years?
Yes, sure. So first of all, there are so many difficulties that is happening for people, not just in the past few weeks or months, just in years. And that's, of course, the economical difficulties that people are having, even like being able to have to provide for the family and having the basics of a simple life. It's now very difficult for many people. But aside from that, there is no freedom of speech. There is no freedom of belief and these things, which have a lot of suppression and corruption in the system. But at the same time, there is also environmental issues like severe water problems in Iran. Iran is now facing. So all these things have been accumulating for years. And when something happens, for example, a couple of years ago, when a young girl got killed by police because of not wearing a quote-unquote proper hijab, then a protest just triggered and people just went to the street. So usually when these things happen, which is quite severe and emotional, it is mostly because of all these restrictions and oppression that is happening over the years. And these things can trigger a protest, but at the same time, the regime has no hesitation of killing, as they have, just opening fire on innocent people when there's a protest.
Now, I want to turn to a clip from Senator John Thune, who commented on a possible Iran strike on Americans. So let's listen.
Well, I think Iran should be prepared for all of America's might to descend upon them if they go after and target Americans or American bases or installations in the Middle East.
Now, Gerard, we've heard this before, and even President Trump has mentioned the consequences to Iran if Americans are harmed. So do you think America is ready to go to war with Iran, or is this warning designed to be a deterrent?
I think America is always ready to go to war with whoever attacks us and kills our people. That has been clear for decades, no matter who's been president. But I think this message is meant as a deterrent. It's meant as a warning. I don't see a high risk of United States service members going in physically to Iran for a war. However, what we mean by defending ourselves might mean cruise missile attacks, might mean providing Israel with a weaponry that it needs. Bunker buster bombs, for example, high altitude gravity bombs that will penetrate the defense facilities that Israel currently cannot attack. Things like that, providing more military support to Israel to conduct its war, or being more flexible in how we provide defense to Israel. Those are ways in which America would defend itself by using other countries who are doing a fantastic job of destroying Iran's military capability. I don't see boots on the ground in any sense of the word.
Now, Massey, final question here this evening. Some Iranian people are hopeful that Israel strikes will result in the downfall of the regime, and others who also oppose the regime don't support what Israel is doing, as we said earlier, and they support Iran's retaliation. So what are your thoughts about these mixed messages?
I think now there is, from what I'm seeing, is that there's a mixed feeling in many people in the majority. I need to go back to 2020 when the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard, they shot down a civilian airplane, which was PS 752, and everyone on board died. And that was actually done by one of the IRGC aerospace commander, which got killed last Friday by Israel. So I think many people feel a sort of like retribution is happening to all these people and all these crimes that they have been doing and have not been answered. But at the same time, as I mentioned, being in a war and being their life in jeopardy is also something that they don't want. But regarding retaliation, I'm not sure, to be honest, if many people actually support that, because they also know that this regime has no hesitation of killing Israeli people and just like bombing the cities. So, of course, there is a minority always that supports the regime, and they also believe in some like radical Islamic things that the regime has. But I would say the majority is actually not supporting a retaliation, but also they don't support the war.
Well, you know, some experts have predicted that this war will be over in a couple of weeks, but I feel like Iran's digging in their heels, and they're not going to negotiate with the U.S. anymore, so we'll have to see what happens. Gerard Filitti, Foreign Affairs Analyst, and Masih Ariani, an Epoch Times correspondent. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, discover how finding your true lens prescription can reduce eye strain and why many eye doctors avoid laser eye surgery themselves, according to a top New York specialist. And the former CEO of 23andMe strikes a deal to buy back the company she co-founded. Find out what it will cost her and why some are concerned about data privacy. More on that after this quick break. Welcome back. Tired eyes are a common problem after hours of screen time, reading, or long-distance driving. For details on eye strain and how to relieve it, NTD's Stephania Cox spoke earlier with Brendan Fallon, NTD health correspondent and host of Vital Signs. Take a listen.
Brendan, nice to see you. What have you got for us today?
I'm back, Steph, and I'm hoping not to make too much of a spectacle of myself. Excuse the pun there. I've been wearing glasses for about 20 years, and it's not something I've really questioned. I've fortunately maintained the same prescription, I think roughly -2 in one eye, -1.5 in the other. And I haven't really thought too much about it. But speaking to this doctor, she's a neuro-ophthalmologist, so she's an eye doctor, but looking also very much at how what's happening in the brain relates to the eye. What she had to say about her own experience with having the wrong prescription really prompted me to think about whether this is something I need to look into. And I think many viewers will be interested to hear what she has to say on this. So this is the first clip we have to look at.
And initially my prescription was about a -2. But then over time, especially during medical school, as I was reading a lot, I was spending a lot of time up close, my prescription increased to a -5 in the right eye and -3 in the left eye. Now, I lived with that prescription for decades. I was wearing glasses or contacts corrected from -5, -3 for decades until finally I had something called a cycloplegic refraction. Now, that is basically drops are put in the eye, the dilating drops that most people get during an eye exam to check the back of the eye. Those drops are put in the eye, and what those drops do is that they paralyze this ciliary muscle over here. They paralyze this muscle, so the muscle is not able to contract. And when the drops are used, the true prescription becomes available. So there's a little bit of complicated optics here, so I'll try to explain it in lay terms. But basically, when a child is looking at distance, and even if they're a little bit myopic, they're trying really, really hard to focus. They're trying really hard to see the smaller letters, and this muscle kicks in. Even though they're not looking up close, they're looking at distance, this muscle can kick in when someone is really trying to strain to focus. So unfortunately, many young people are overcorrected because this accommodation muscle is active when it really shouldn't be. So the drops prevent that muscle from working, and it gives a true prescription. So back to what happened to me, when I had that cycloplegic refraction done, which was unfortunately in my 40s, I went for decades wearing the wrong prescription. And even as an eye care provider, I never actually went to get a proper cycloplegic refraction. What was discovered is that instead of a -5, my right eye was actually a -3.5. And instead of a -3, my left eye was actually a -150. So a huge decrease in my prescription because I was overcorrected for so many years.
Fascinating. So this is from an interview that you made with this doctor for Vital Signs earlier this year, Dr. Bannock. Right, it is, right? And so what advice did she give in terms of people who might be considering getting surgery or somehow other fixing their eyesight?
Well, on this issue of getting the cycloplegic refraction test done, she's saying anyone, if you are myopic, if you're experiencing eye strain with your current prescription, or if you have children who are myopic, she recommends really looking into getting this done because you could be wearing too high a prescription and it's causing you to strain your eyes.
Yeah, it does look like a fascinating area of inquiry. Any surprises from the interview?
Yeah, well, one thing that really stood out to me, I asked her about getting laser surgery done. My mother's had this and raves about it. I know many people have had success with this. But she said, as an eye doctor, she wouldn't get it done. And many doctors don't get this done. And here she explains the reason why.
The risks are very, very low. But one thing I'll tell you, and I hope, Brandon, your listeners really think about this when they're considering laser eye surgery. I always tell my patients, if you go to any ophthalmology conference or optometry conference and you're looking around in the room and, at these conferences, sometimes we have 30, 40,000 eye doctors all together in one place. Most of us are wearing glasses or contacts. And you have to ask, okay, so why is it that the doctors who do the surgery don't get it done on themselves? Okay, so I mentioned I'm myopic. I have never gotten LASIK done and I never will. I'm happy with my contact lenses. So why is it that the doctors who do the procedures are not getting it done on themselves? And there's an answer for this. It's because we know what the risks can be. And even though those risks are very, very small, they're minute, having a complication is not worth it to us because we've seen all the complications. We've dealt with the complications. We know how potentially devastating it can be to get an infection or to get scarring in the cornea. So we're not willing to risk that for our vision because we use our vision for our livelihood. We operate, we do eye exams, we need to be able to see clearly. So if you're in a profession where you have high, really demanding visual requirements, for example, pilots or people who are in the military or people who are in law enforcement, they really need to have excellent vision. For those individuals, or surgeons, for example, for those individuals, maybe think twice before you consider getting laser refractive surgery. But for the general population, most people get it done and they're very, very thrilled with the result.
So I know this is part of a much longer episode and discussion with Dr. Bannock, but was there anything that kind of changed your perspective on eye care or vision correction?
Certainly. I think it really prompted me just to think about how I care for my eyes. And just so generally, so many of us are stuck in front of a computer screen for so much of our day. And I'm doing that. Sometimes I'm getting headaches. Sometimes I can feel eye strain. I'm getting dry eyes. And she offered a very useful exercise, a very simple exercise to relieve eye strain, and it's called the 20-20-20 rule. And it's as simple as just every 20 minutes, if you're sitting in front of your screen, you look away 20 yards into the distance for 20 seconds, and then you can go back to whatever you're doing. And that I've been doing this. I do it when I can remember to do it, and it does. I think it does relieve that strain on the eyes.
Yeah, on the eyes and on the mind, it seems. Get you a bit of perspective. Was there anything else that kind of touched on broader issues of eye care relating to access or nutrition and things like that?
Broader issues, there's so much in this episode, and I really encourage viewers to check it out, because it's a look at not just, look mainly at natural ways to improve myopia, but also some of the leading medical techniques that are being employed. And one thing is just like getting outside more. They're finding with kids, there's studies being done showing children who are spending more time outside in the sun have better vision. And
right. Is this? Did she mention anything about vitamin D or any specific functions that come into that, or perhaps that's all we need is the practical side of it to take that step? I'm sure that the vitamin D isn't doing any harm. I think it's also just, we're not meant to be stuck in front of a screen all the time. We're not meant to be even reading like this, just constantly looking up close. Yeah. Getting outside, you're prompted to look into the distance, which is what our eyes are meant to be doing. Yeah. And so I think that's a significant factor in this. It all comes back to some very core principles that ways we've lived for many, many years as a humankind. But so good to have these reminders as well and see some of the science behind it. Thank you so much, Brendan. Good to speak with you.
Always a pleasure, Steph. Thank you.
For more details, check out NTD's Vital Signs with Brendan Fallon. The program zooms in on health and wellness in everyday life, connecting the dots for the big picture of our composite health. Find it on epochtv.com by clicking the Talk Shows tab. The nonprofit 23andMe co-founder and former CEO Anne Wojcicki has won a bid to acquire the genetic testing company. Her nonprofit company, TTAM Research Institute, will buy 23andMe for $305 million. 23andMe has collected genetic data through saliva samples from 15 million customers, but the company filed for bankruptcy back in March, sparking concerns about data privacy. Wojcicki also stepped down at the time. Many worried their genetic data could be sold to a third party. A lawsuit was filed by more than 24 states Monday to block the sale of genetic data without customer consent. TTAM said it will comply with 23andMe's privacy policies and honor existing policies for customer data rights. The deal ends a bidding war between TTAM and Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. A bankruptcy court must officially approve the deal. A hearing is set for Tuesday. And last night, America celebrated the U.S. Army's 250th anniversary with a full-scale military parade. NTD was in Washington for special live coverage of the event. And our own Paul Graney spoke to bystanders about what the parade meant to them. Here's what a few of them had to say.
How did you feel watching the parade today?
Very inspired, proud. Was very glad to be here.
When are you going to get another 250 years? I had to be here,
Peaceful excitement.
It was the coolest thing ever, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
He is retiring after 20 years in the Army, and so it was a good way to send him off.
I'm a Marine. I'm glad to be here with the Army.
All of the old uniforms, but I loved all the artillery. My sons are 13B in the Army, and I'd like to sing that also.
If I had to pick one, the parachute.
And the Pipe and Drum Corps, I like that. So.
3rd ACR that came through the Armored Cavalry Division, that was one I was assigned to. So
this is the only chance I'm ever going to get this close to all this machinery.
I really like the robotic dogs that just went by a few minutes ago.
Watching them young boys, 22, 23 at the top of their game, they were having a blast.
Why did you feel it was important to come today?
Represent America and show support for all the troops and stuff.
That gives everybody our freedom and our rights that we have today.
We're military through and through, and I'm here to support our country, support our president.
250 years worth of United States fighting force. And I feel like I'm so excited it's on display not only in this country, but I know other countries are watching it too. And so they know who we are and don't mess with us.
Coming up, eye-catching volcanoes appear on the red planet while our sun gives us a never-before-seen view. And from space to the deep sea, a mysterious deep-sea creature emerges for the first time. And Girl Scouts in Massachusetts surprised service members with nearly 14,000 boxes of cookies, a generous show of appreciation for the troops' unwavering service. Details in just a minute here on NTD News. A well-known volcano makes a cloudy cameo on another world, plus never-before-seen views of our sun, and a mysterious deep-sea creature emerge from the first-time watch.
A newly released image from NASA shows a haunting look at a Martian volcano's peak peeking through clouds on the red planet. This first-of-its-kind panorama of the ancient volcano Arsia Mons was captured by the Odyssey orbiter in the early morning hours, which NASA says is when the planet's peaks are often shrouded in water-ice clouds. Arsia is the southernmost of 3 volcanoes that lie just south of the solar system's largest volcano, Olympus Mons. But wait, there's more from Mars volcano-wise. Researchers may have discovered a new Martian volcano hiding in plain sight. A study published in the journal Communications, Earth and Environment says what was previously thought to be a small mountain on the rim of the Jezero crater may actually be a volcano. The theory is supported by surface data from the Perseverance rover, which revealed that the crater's floor near the peak in question is not sedimentary, but instead volcanic rock. Here's another out-of-this-world first look. The European Space Agency recently released a never-before-seen view of the sun's south pole. It was captured by a solar orbiter, which was given new access from a recent Venus flyby, allowing it to venture outside its previous orbital plane and capture the normally obscured southern pole in all its whirling, turbulent glory. Finally, here's an otherworldly first look captured on our own world. For the first time ever, researchers glimpsed this rare deep-sea squid in the flesh. Before now, the 3-foot-long species known as Gonadus antarcticus was only found dead or in parts, but a remotely operated vehicle traveling 7,000 feet below the surface of ocean waters got a rare holiday gift when the elusive squid floated by its cameras on Christmas Day. For Take a Look at This.
And a show of gratitude behind boxes of sweet treats. Girl Scouts of Central and Western Massachusetts sent nearly 14,000 boxes of cookies to military facilities this week, a gesture of thanks to service members there. June 14th marked the U.S. Army's 250th birthday, and Girl Scouts of Central and Western Massachusetts were well prepared to celebrate. Monday, service members at Barnes Air National Guard Base and the United Service Organizations woke up to a big surprise. Over 1,000 cases of homemade cookies were delivered to their doors. The program, named Project Care and Share, is designed to engage young people to support the military community through meaningful civic activities. A Scout leader says this is a lesson in generosity and a sweet way to support service members who are far from home. From the ruins of war to the pages of Marvel and DC, Croatian artists have built stories as powerful as the ones they illustrate. They have now built a reputation within the popular world of comic books. Here's a closer look.
The Avengers may assemble in New York, and Batman may guard the streets of Gotham. But some of the artists who bring these heroes to life do it far from the spotlight. Before the breakup of Yugoslavia in the early 1990s, comics were a staple of youth culture in the region. From that era emerged a generation of Croatian artists who would later earn international acclaim in an industry far from home.
We've always had great talent, but as the market declined significantly in our country, these talented individuals, thanks to their skill and excellence, were forced to seek opportunities abroad.
Dalibor Talic is a former clarinet teacher who traded music for illustration and never looked back. Today, his resume includes titles such as Deadpool, X-Men, Avengers, and The Hulk.
I was firstly published in a couple of small publishers, but I was persistent and I was very annoying in regards of sending emails all around. And it took me, let's say, 15 years to break the ice. I mean, to appear in the foreign market, in the American market. But after that, only 2 years it took to get to Marvel.
Breaking into the international market wasn't easy. It was a long process. But when the opportunity finally came, he seized it with both hands.
It all comes down to Bruce Lee. He would say, opportunities may or may not come. But if they do, one must be prepared. So a lot of work, a lot of discipline, and every chance you get, you take it.
So when war started in early 90s, animation studios closed down, so I was left with only my hobby. And it was apparent quite early on that I couldn't really make a living in Croatia doing comics, so it was either changing the trade or trying to get some work abroad, so that's what I managed to do in '96.
Esad Ribic is known for his work on various titles for Marvel Comics. This includes X-Men, Thor, Wolverine, Loki, Silver Surfer, and Submariner. Both artists agree that there is no secret formula for success in the international market, but they have some wise advice for any beginners.
Get as good as you can and try not to copy stuff you like too much, because if you do that, you will end up doing stuff that somebody else is already doing probably better than you. So try to limit influences you get from what you're interested in.
You have deadline, you have a ridiculous amount of stuff to draw. You draw, nobody asks you. So practice discipline, practice speed, practice the low bar, you know, the level of quality that you don't go below ever, regardless of circumstances.
Today, both artists are celebrated in the comic book world, not just as artists from Croatia, but as creators whose work has helped define modern superhero storytelling.
A special swimming club in Asia is welcoming a community with open arms and free lessons. In southern India, a man has taught over 10,000 people how to swim for free. He calls it the most effective way to protect his community. On the western coast of India, one man named Saji arrives at a riverbank at 5:30 a.m. every morning. That's to teach his free swim lessons. He's taught over 10,000 people a life-saving skill, how to conquer the fear of water. His efforts started after a tragedy in 2009 where a boat carrying 15 kids and their teacher sank in a nearby river. Wanting to help prevent future accidents, Saji taught his own kids to swim, then the kids of his friends now. 16 years later, he runs a major swimming club. Saji says he can teach kids to swim in just 16 days, what he calls his effort to help protect his community. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. And that's all for tonight's news. Thank you for tuning in. I'm Arlene Richards. Good night.